Hello, and welcome to a cozy mini painting session here on Of Metal and Magic. We're painting a monodrone today. This is a WizKids mini. It comes in a 2-pack with the duo drone, so let me know if you want me to paint that in a future session. But otherwise, grab your brushes and let's get to it. These normally come pre-primed in a light gray. I've gone ahead and given it a dark black wash to kind of soak into those recesses. Then I gave it a dry brush in a light gray followed by a white to bring out those highlights. But it also means that if we go nice and thin with our paints, then we'll be able to kind of utilize that undercoat so we don't have to do as much heavy lifting with our highlights later on. But we'll see how that plays out. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. Speaking of colors, we're going to hop over to Future Me to see what kind of colors I used in this particular paint. Okay, so today I took use of the Dwarven Bronze from the D&D paint set, as well as Curing Gold. These take care of the majority of the body, and then Mithril Silver serves as an accent color. Lawful White is going to go on the wings, as well as for the eye. Speaking of the eye, we have Frost Blue, as well as a Ghostly Blue. We mix these a little bit together. Next up is Abyssal Black, and that's just going to be for the iris. And then we have Angelic Yellow. We mix this in with the gold and the bronze for highlighting. For washes, we have a sepia shade, but if you're just working with the D&D set, then you can use a flesh wash. This is the umber wash, and likewise you can use the brown wash. Red wash is going to be our heavy lifter. And then we have black wash. We're just going to use that a little bit here and there. For brushes, I am going to be using just the number 2 brush and a size 0 brush. That's pretty much all we'll need, really. But feel free to bring out your dry brush too if you want to add a little bit of ease to some of the highlighting. Okay, so first up, let's get most of this body covered. I think bronze is the way to go. We're going to start off by going into some of these harder to reach recesses. Get the hard bit out of the way first. That way we can relax a little bit more with the rest of the mini. As you can see, I didn't clean up any of the flashing or the mold lines for this. I normally do. I like to keep minis clean, but you know what? We're keeping a relaxed vibe for these videos. And it kind of works for this mini, honestly. It's almost like a weld line, if you will. So feel free to carve that off with a X-Acto knife, or if you have the, there's a specific tool for it from Citadel. Although it may be hard to reach in some of those places, just be sure to reprime over the exposed plastic when you do that. The nice thing about these first layers is you don't have to be too delicate with any of your paint strokes. You can just kind of go in, start slathering over the area, but me, I'm going to be a little bit gentle. I want to try and make use of that undercoat as best as I can, but try not to stress about it. It's not too much extra work just to go back over some of these areas later on and give it a highlight instead of relying on the undercoat. I like the undercoat because it helps highlight some of the details that you may not necessarily see when the mini is just in one single color. Sometimes it's really hard to actually pinpoint some specific details that you maybe want to give like a little bit of pizzazz to. Like maybe if this monodrone had a red button somewhere, and you didn't notice that that red button was there, and then you can paint it red, and then in your games, when your players notice that red button, maybe it turns this guy off. Who knows? That's entirely up to you with your mini. The nice thing about painting your own minis, it's your own world. You can paint these guys whatever you want. If you wanted this mini to be a silver monodrone, absolutely, go for it. I'm kind of relying on the source material for this particular mini, but I don't always do that. So in the source material, they probably lean a little bit more gold than they do bronze, but I didn't want to keep going in with just one type of gold / bronze paints. The reason I've got both the gold and the bronze is so that I can highlight some of the details. If you paint it all in one color, it can get a little bit hard to see. So once we're done with the bronze, we're going to go into those joints with gold. this is kind of the moment where we see if any of that undercoat shines through. Metallic paints can be a little bit hard just because of the nature of them. If you go on too thin, then they don't really have that much of an effect. But it can mean that the undercoat does shine through. So we'll see if this works. Normally, I tend to go with a solid color and a darker color at that. When I go with metallics, I like to go in with a black. Sometimes I'll go in with a red in case I want that little bit of extra sheen. It gives different effects, and I encourage you to play around with it. That's one of the reasons why we are going to go in with a red wash later on, because I think it gives an extra dimension over just a standard black wash over everything. Just going in nice and gentle. I think for the mouth area, just to distinguish it from the bronze that surrounds it, I'm going to go in with a gold for that particular area. Just so that we know it's not part of the rest of the body. It's its own material. And gold is very malleable. That kind of plays into the idea of it. It's solid metal, but it moves. Alright, and we just spin the mini around, make sure we didn't miss anything on the bulk of the body before we move on. It can be easy to miss things when you've got, wings in the way, arms in the way, but that's okay if you miss a spot. We'll just come back and touch that up a little bit later on. Sometimes you don't notice that until later on, just because, the way you look at a mini when you're looking at its foot, you're looking at it at a totally different angle from when you're looking at the body, and that shows you areas that you wouldn't have seen if you were just looking at the body. And that's one of the reasons why we're base coating everything first. That way we don't have to re-highlight any specific areas if we did miss anywhere. Alright, let's get a top up on some of our paint real quick. And I'm not using a wet palette or anything, just because these are metallic paints. Normally, I'd use a wet palette and then put a decent amount of paint down, enough that I think is going to cover this whole mini, but right now, I'm just using a dry palette. Metallics can seep through your membrane into your sponge, or at least that's what I've been told. I've never tested that out. I don't feel like I want to test that out. But that means the paints dry out faster, because I'm not using a wet palette. So that means I'm only using a little bit here and there, so you'll see me probably top up on paints fairly frequently as I set the mini down, but that'll give you a chance to look over your own mini, look over my mini, see if I've missed anywhere. And it's always good to give your mini a once over before you paint, just to kind of get a feel for it, identify anywhere that looks like it's going to be hard to paint, anywhere that's hard to reach. You maybe want to paint those areas first. That way, you don't have to be concerned about having to be too neat with those areas. You can just put a whole bunch of paint on your brush and smush it into those areas. But, always make sure to water your paints down, because you don't want it obscuring any details. The nice thing with this mini is there really aren't too many details that I need to worry about thinning my paints for. There's the wings, certainly. There's the rivets and the eye and the mouth. But a lot of this is smooth. On the other hand, when you've got a lot of details, it's nice because you just come in with a dry brush, or you just come in with a slightly smaller detail brush, and you can pick out those details. With a dry brush, you just go over it once, and hey, those details pop really nicely. Or with these feathers, you can just go in one by one and highlight each of them if you're feeling it. But when you've got a lot of smooth surfaces, you have to work a little bit extra to make those areas shine. And I can tell that I might have to come in with some highlights, but we'll see what the washes do afterwards. I was hoping that undercoat would come out a little bit more, and maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I might have to step back from this and, give it a fresh perspective. But right now, I don't think it did, and that's okay. It still makes it easier to see for the camera, and that's great. Okay, so far so good on this. Right now I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to put gold on those feet or whether I want them to be bronze as well. I know I'm putting gold on all of the joints. Anywhere that looks like it's an articulated area. Anywhere that needs to move. And the ankle needs to move, but the foot itself doesn't. However, I do want to give it a little bit of distinction from the leg. I don't want it to blend into the leg, so I think I will go in with a gold once we break that color out. And we're getting pretty close. We got most of the main body covered. And trying to get all of these little bits on the wing is a little bit difficult just because of the wing itself kind of obscuring it. And I don't know if it comes out on camera, but sometimes the paint goes on really thin just because of the nature of metallic paints. It's essentially, little gold flecks or little bronze flecks suspended in paint medium. I don't know if they put pigment in there as well. But because of that, it's a little bit see-through. So sometimes you don't quite get the coverage that you want with metallics. And that's why I usually go in with a dark undercoat. So the light undercoats, they're a little bit more noticeable. And I'm kind of battling with that, whether I want to let that be or not. Okay, so far so good. Now we're moving on to the fingers. Those are multi-articulated pieces, so we'll see if we can just do, the pieces of the finger between the joints. Oh, got a little bit of hair on my brush. And then we'll go on with the gold after the fact. But if we go over, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. It's such a small piece that, honestly, people may not even notice that I painted the knuckles gold. Because a lot of people will be seeing this mini on the table from 2-3 feet away. If you're new to mini painting, then there is a arm's reach kind of rule. If you're worried about whether or not to paint a specific detail, or whether you're happy with how the colors have blended together, or just the overall aesthetic of how you've painted the mini so far, be sure to hold it away at arm's reach, and that way you can tell what everyone else is going to be seeing. As a mini painter, we've got this thing right up in our face, so it's easy to be critical of areas that don't seem like they blend. But at a distance, you know what? It turns out that they do. And believe it or not, that's pretty common in life. You'll actually see, if you see billboards on the side of the road, even though they look clear from a distance, those are fairly low resolution because nobody's going to be up close to those things. They're going to be viewing those from much, much further away, so they don't need a high resolution image up on that billboard. You can see that my brush is a little bit old, and that's okay. We don't need high-end brushes to paint minis, especially not to tabletop standard. These brushes I've had for a couple of years. I've maintained them as best I could. They're just cheap brushes that I got online for, I think, $15 or $16. They came with a whole bunch of different sizes, but really I mostly just use this number 2 brush as well as my size 0 brush. Alright, tap up on paint, and we're ready to go again. Let's hit those gold areas. Starting with the mouth, I try to go for the most recessed and hard to reach areas first. And I think that just comes from wanting to get the difficult parts out of the way. I don't know if you'll be able to tell in any of the footage, but I do have handshakes here and there. It's not a not a constant thing, but if I know my hand's not shaking right now, then I might as well go for the details, the areas that I need a steady hand. But fortunately, this little bit of area is nice and easy to paint. The recess between the bronze and where the gold's going to be, that makes a nice little border. So as long as I don't have too much paint going up my bristles, then I can just smoosh my brush in there and let the edges guide it. There we go. And those details are a little bit obscured around the mouth, but that's okay. That's okay, because that's what the wash is going to help with. That's going to bring those details back instead of all of them blending together. And we're going to see if just a red wash does the trick with this, but we might go in a little bit with one of the other washes, whether that's going to be a brown wash or a black wash, just to help accentuate the details on this particular area. And now it's just a matter of going around and methodically picking out all of the areas that I've assigned for gold. Another reason you don't want to necessarily be too neat and precise when you're going in with your base coat, like with the bronze here, it's okay if I go over onto the articulated bit, because when I go back over it with the gold, that means there's no seam. If I'm a little bit too exact with my bronze going up to the line and then my gold going up to the line on the other side, sometimes you'll get a little bit of the undercoat or the primer or whatever you have underneath it, and that can be a little bit jarring. That's a little bit more noticeable, especially when you've got a light colored primer. If you're priming in black, then it's a lot harder to notice. So that's an argument to be made for black, although with black it's a little bit harder to see those details that you need to paint. If you're just going in a solid color, then gray is probably the way to go personally. White can work too, just because the lights that you're using are going to generate a shadow, but if you're using black, it can be a little bit harder to tell. Oh, gotta keep my eye on the camera here for focus issues. Sometimes I just get a little bit too into the mini painting, and then I bring it closer and closer to where my face is. My face is just like right behind the camera. So you're seeing pretty much what I'm seeing, but the problem is, if I bring it too close, it goes out of focus, and I don't necessarily notice because, I'm here just having a good time. I'm painting a mini. This is what I love. This is what I enjoy, and I hope you enjoy it too. I hope you're painting along with me, whether it's a monodrone, a duodrone, or something completely different. That's quite all right. That's okay. If you are painting something along with me, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you're painting along with me. And then you can find me on social media and share an image. Like, say, hey, this is what I painted along while you were painting this monodrone. I'd love to see pictures. And whether it's your first mini, your second mini, your 500th mini, I'd love to see it. One of the reasons why I wanted to tackle the monodrone as one of our early minis is because it's such a nice mini to paint. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. You don't have to get stressed out about any details, really. Like, sure, some of the nubs are going to be a little bit hard to get in and paint properly, but that's okay. That's quite all right. If you're not confident, you can just go ahead and paint it all in one color. Hit it with a dry brush, and it'll still look great. It'll look great on your table. Your players are going to love it. Or if you just want it as a display piece, you're putting this in a diorama, it's still going to look amazing. So right now you can definitely see some of the, oh, hold on, there we go. As I was saying, you can definitely see how the gold stands out from the bronze. It stands out a little bit, I don't want to say too much. It stands out very drastically from the bronze, and that can be perfect if that's what you're looking for. I think I'm going to try and tone that down a little bit with the washes, use those washes in my favor. And that's another nice thing about washes is they can really help blend things together. So if you're a bit more messy as a painter, if you're just trying to get this on the table or you're still practicing your technique, don't worry too much at this point. You got to trust the process. Before I, go on a rant about trusting the process, I did realize that I missed these areas and I wanted to do them in bronze. So fortunately, my bronze in that little cup over to the side is still wet. That means I can just about get a little bit of bronze on here before I switch back over to the gold. But yeah, trusting the process. Right now, we're just putting on base coats, and if it's a little bit messy, that's okay, because when you go on with your washes, they'll sink into the recesses, and they'll kind of obscure some of the areas where the colors maybe went over the lines a little bit, and they'll help shade those areas, they'll help blend those colors together, and make it look completely natural. So at this point, you don't need to stress too much. Just, enjoy the moment, enjoy the process, and trust that those washes later on are going to really help. There's a reason they're called talent in a can, because not only do they help bring out all of the details, but they help hide the crimes, so to speak, to quote a phrase from Adam Savage. Then, coming back in later with your highlighting, you're able to refine those areas, draw attention to the bits that you do want, and a dry brush as a method of highlighting is great because it'll kind of do the same thing as a wash. If you've got a bunch of similar colors, let's say you're doing browns, you can use the same kind of cream dry brush over the top of everything, and it helps tie all of the colors in together without making them look the same. And if this was a more detailed mini, like maybe the Duodrone's got a little bit more detail to it, maybe that's what I'll do. I'd, go in with the bronze and the gold, and instead of using the washes to blend everything together, I'll probably do that too. But I can also go in with a dry brush and use that technique to kind of make sure everything blends together seamlessly, or a little bit more seamlessly. I'm not really sure what these little bits are on the back of the knee. It feels like that would hinder some movement, but you know what? Maybe it's a little bit of a motor. I don't really know how these guys work. They're a little bit magical, they're a little bit mechanical. According to the monster manual, they come from the plane of order, if I remember correctly. So I imagine they're a little bit of both. They're a little bit mechanical and a little bit magical. So maybe that's just a little bit of a motor to help those knees articulate. Maybe it's a little bit more strength than the elbows do, because the elbows don't seem to have anything on them. The elbows, the shoulders, it's just those knees, but those knees are carrying a lot of weight. They're carrying the whole body up. Or maybe they serve a completely different function. Let me know if you've got any ideas, or if it says and I just don't know. The lore for, D&D and Pathfinder and all these games, they're so intense. It's so hard to know everything, but that's quite all right. Personally, I like to make my own lore. I'm very much a homebrew kind of person, and that's just because it's easier to hold that all in my mind than reading up all of the lore. When I create something myself, it's there, it's permanent, But with other people's lore, I need to kind of keep rereading it and refreshing my memory on everything. Don't know if you heard my cat in the background. He's here to pay a visit. He's our resident cat, our tavern cat, I like to call him on the internet. Don't be afraid to get into some weird angles with your mini. I'm sure at some point or another I'm probably going to have to tip this mini upside down, almost certainly to tackle those wings. Although I'm not sure. Those wings I'm not really sure if I need to add anything to because of the dry brush that I did earlier. They're already kind of white. They're That's what I would normally do for white. White's a little bit challenging, you know? Because you want to get those shadows so you can get the details, but if you need to get everything looking pristine white, that's a really challenging thing to do. So maybe we'll go in with some diluted white paint and see if that does the trick. Sometimes the black wash and then the gray can kind of dirty that white up a little bit too much. It'll work for a lot of things, especially like clothing. You know, clothing's never too clean, but for these wings and in all the pictures, those wings are almost angelic, you know, they're pristine. So we'll see if we can't brighten those up just a little bit, but see what we can do to save those details. Okay, I think I've got, I've got most of the gold done and in place. We're just touching up a few areas here and there. I'm trying not to go into those recesses in the joints where, you know, I've already had that black wash do the hard work for me. I don't mind going back in over those again later with a black wash or my red wash later on. But right now, if I can avoid it, that'd be helpful for down the road. There we go. I still have the other foot to tackle. And then I think there are a couple of bits on the wings that I want to take a closer look at, see if those could do with some gold on them, you know. They're not explicitly articulated, but they've got to be if they're wings. They flap, right? So maybe we will go in with some gold. And it's totally okay not to know what you're going to do with a mini as you start painting. Sometimes you just got to let the mini speak. Let the little monodrone tell you what colors it wants to be. And you can, you know, have a good understanding of color theory and all that and what colors work well together, but sometimes you just got to add in a little bit of a different vibe, what feels right. Oh, and I missed a little bit underneath the wing right here. This is what I was talking about earlier. Sometimes it's hard to tell when you're focusing just a bit on that one area, but you move to a different area and suddenly you have a new perspective. That's a pretty good lesson on life, too. Sometimes you just gotta move around and get a fresh perspective. Alright. I'm trying to determine if I can actually get underneath, if I need to get underneath or not, between the arm and the body, and I can just barely do it. Just make sure there's not too much paint on the end of your brush. And, you know, just trust that you'll be able to get it. But if not, if you fumble it, that's okay. We haven't done any detail work. We haven't done any highlighting. We can just get our bronze paint again and, you know, touch up the areas that we went over accidentally. That's gonna happen. Can't beat ourselves up over that. We're only human. We're not little mechanical, magical creatures from the plane of order. There we go. Just touching up an area that it looks like I missed. I don't know if I missed it or if I just went a little bit too thin on the paint there and the undercoat showed a bit too much. So just put a little bit more of that bronze right there. Alright, so these look like they're ball joints, so I'm going to tackle that with a little bit of gold so that it hints to that articulation. I've put that articulation everywhere else, or the gold for everywhere else that articulates. Might as well here. And then I'll probably do that little top bit at the wing too, just because it looks like that bit holds some of the wings. It, like, maybe in my mind, it helps spread some of the wings out a bit more. So I can kind of compress them, expand them as needed. Okay, let's top up on our paint really quickly. Because I didn't give myself a whole lot of gold. I didn't think I'd need too much, and I don't, but I didn't give myself quite enough, and I just need a little bit more for those top little bits, and for the ball joints here on this on these wings. And be sure to let me know if this is a format of mini painting that you like. We're right at the start of this channel, so we're trying out things. We're seeing where the vibe takes us. If you'd rather, a few more ones where I don't talk and you just, you kind of look, observe, watch me paint, then that's okay. Maybe I'll do a few of those. But right now, I kind of want to guide you through it. This is for new painters as much as experienced painters. I know that when I paint, I love to paint with other people. I love to set up little events on my Discord where people can join in while I paint. They don't have to paint too, but I like to turn it into a bit of a social thing, It's a fun time. It's a very calming experience, and I like to share that with others. And if you're not painting, I hope this is a calming experience for you too. Just watching me, move some paint around this mini. And if you are painting, I hope it's not too stressful. Especially as a new painter, I know it can be a little bit worrying, a little bit daunting, a little bit stressful, but it's going to be okay. That mini's going to look great. And if it doesn't come out exactly how you want it, that's okay. It's your first mini. We all got to start somewhere. Don't let that hold you back. So we're just touching up some of the areas where it looks like I went a little bit too thin with my paints. It's always easy to add an extra coat when you go on with thin layers, but it's a lot harder to undo that when you go in with really thick paint. If you go in with too much paint and that dries, that's a little bit hard to remove. It's not impossible, but it's a little bit tricky. So, save yourself some time now. Go on with some thin layers. You just want to water your paint down to the consistency of milk, or close to that. It doesn't have to be exact, and then you're good. All right, let's see if my handshakes are gonna behave. You can see that both the mini and my hand are shaking a little bit. Sorry if we go a little bit out of frame here. I just need to get in real close and see. Just make sure that I'm getting everything that I want to get with this mini. I'm trying not to get too close to those edges because we've got those nice shadows from the wash that we did before when we set this mini up. And I want to make use of that. I want to give that a little bit of distinction between the edge of, where that metal is and where the eye begins. And these eyes are really interesting in the source material. When you look at artwork, whether it's from the actual official WotC pieces, just watering down my white paint. Hopefully this is good. We're just going to take a leap of faith. I'm not sure about it, but that's okay. We can bring it back. It's nice and thin. It's really watered down. And we can go back in with a clean brush and maybe soak some of that up. And undo some of that. If you ever need an eraser when you're painting, just a clean, wet brush. That'll help pull the paint away. But this is kind of the angelic white that those pictures show. Anyway, I was talking about the eyes before, I went on about watering this white paint down. The eyes are very human-like, very humanoid-like, I should say. They're not mechanical at all. All the artwork shows bright blue eyes, bright green eyes. So let's see if we can do that. Okay, so let's see if we can pull some of this back. Get some of that detail visible again. Because while it's certainly angelic white, it's certainly like this beautiful bright white, but that hides all of our details. We can't see that. Certainly not at a distance, maybe up close, but yeah, that's a little bit better. That's a little bit better. Alright, so that might be the trick. It's okay to experiment with your mini. See what works, see what doesn't work. Let's do the same thing to the underside. But with the underside, we might pull a little bit more back, or maybe going a little bit thinner if we can with this white. It's not quite a wash, but more like a glaze, I suppose. We're going to go a little bit thinner and pull more of it back because that's on the underside. So it's got a little bit more shadow to it. Like I was saying earlier, don't be afraid to flip your mini into unusual positions just to get to those weird angles. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm bracing my hand against the table just to help with my handshakes just a little bit. Alright, I think that's good. I think we can move on to the eyes. But first, I am going to take a quick little break, stretch my arms, stretch my back. Really important to do when you're mini painting. Just give yourself a couple of breaks here and there. So there'll be a cut, and when we're back, we'll tackle that eye. And welcome back if you decided to have a break with me. Hope you're feeling rested, your arms are stretched, your shoulders are relaxed, and you're ready to get back into painting. I've already got some colors lined up for me. The first one is going to be the ghostly blue, and we're just going to paint the iris. I don't know if it comes across on camera, but the iris is raised on this mini, which gives us some nice lines to follow. But if you go over the lines, that's okay, because I just did. We're gonna just clean off our brush, get a little bit wet, and mop up any of that excess paint that went over those lines. You do have to be a little bit quick about that, but there's some flexibility. You don't have to necessarily go straight in, but it makes it the easiest if you do. Alright, I think we're good there, and we can get back in with the ghostly blue, and we're just going to trace those lines until we're happy with the final circle. Once we're happy with the final circle, we'll go in with our darker blue, our frost blue, and kind of give the effect of those, the multicolored eye effect, where you've got those lines of one color and lines of another color overlapping. And I'm also going to leave the pupil completely white, or as white as I can, just because I have something that I want to try. I'm going to, instead of going in with a black paint, which is something that I would normally do, I'm going to go in with a black wash. I don't know if it's necessarily going to work, but we're going to give it a go. I have a hunch that it won't work, but that's okay. It's still worth trying, still worth seeing what the effect is. I'm going to use the black wash in there just because it'll make it nice and easy with the pupil being recessed. All I have to do is just drop a little bit in. I don't have to be too precise with it, unlike I would have to be with black paint. And it'll also give a nice glossy look. Something you can do after the fact is if you have a gloss varnish that you can paint with, then you can actually just gloss varnish the eye. Although, that being said, this is a metallic mini, so you could gloss varnish a lot of this and it would make sense. The only thing that you probably wouldn't do is the ground. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but if we have time, we'll tackle the ground, but for right now, since this is one of our earlier videos, I'm just gonna leave the ground for now, and if we have a little bit of time at the end, we'll quickly tackle it. So we want to make sure we don't have too much paint on our brush when we're doing these lines. We want nice thin lines. It's okay if you go a little bit too thick. You saw like my first one was a bit thick, but that's really easy to fix. All we'll do is we'll finish up with our darker blue. And if we want, we can come back in with our light blue afterwards. But for right now, I'm just giving a basic effect, because I'll probably come back in a little bit later and give a highlight effect where there's more light blue towards the top and more dark blue towards the bottom, but still have that kind of crisscross pattern with the with the two different color tones. Alright, so we're now going to go in with our red wash, and I'm focusing specifically on the gold bits for now. Mostly because I'm worried if I go in with my red wash on all of the gold and the bronze, it'll blend together too much. Oh, our cat's paying us a visit again. Hello. So for right now, I'm just going to focus on the areas that are gold, and we'll use a different colored wash for the bronze sections. I've also just realized that I have completely forgotten all of the silver portions of the mini, mostly because the effect of the dry brushed black to gray to white, that's all come out fairly metallic, and that's not a bad effect. If you're happy with that, that's perfect for you. In fact, I may actually leave the main staff, the main handle portion of the spear, as that kind of dry brushed black to gray to white, and we'll put metallic silver on the spear tip as well as around the eye. That seems like it'll be a nice effect. But for now, we're just going to focus on the paints and washes that we have ready at our disposal. That way they don't dry up. Alright, we're just making sure we don't miss any sections. And with washes, it's nice because you don't have to worry about going over. You can be a little bit messy with washes. And in a lot of cases, it's good if they go over because they will provide shadows on the outsides of the portions that you're trying to give depth and shading to. And if you do go a little bit too far over, like you make a bit too much of a splash, that's okay. That'll be really easy to fix with the original color. You just go back in with, say, your bronze or your gold, and just touch up those little areas that you went a bit too heavy on. Or if the paint's still wet, you can do the eraser effect, the mop effect, where you clean off your brush, try and soak up any excess. Either one is completely valid. Oh, there's me again getting so into painting that I'm not checking my focus. Let's make sure that everything looks good. And I do want to be careful of those white wings. I don't want red getting on those white wings, but I can touch that up if they do. It's not a big stress. If I go over on the brass, it's a lot easier to hide, but red will really show up on those wings. We just want to make sure we get into all those nooks and crannies. No little bit of gold gets forgotten about. No gold left behind. Alright, now that we're done with all the paints that I had prepped on the side, we can bring out our silver and get to touching up those areas, or not touching up, but painting those areas that I meant to tackle earlier. Like I said earlier, you could just leave it as is if you're happy with the effect. With that dry brushing, it does look fairly metallic. You could even use silver to do a little bit of edge highlighting. Maybe you only go on specific areas where the light would particularly catch, and that way you get a little bit of that extra silver effect. I'm going to go ahead and go on with a thin coat of silver just to cover everything up. And we do want to be a little bit delicate around some of these areas, just because we've already put a wash in, so we want to make sure that we don't obscure those, but we can always reapply that wash later on after touching up the original color. That's not too hard to do, and you won't notice it at a distance. You won't notice it when it's on the table, especially amongst other minis. And we're gonna give silver to these little bolts too. I was trying to decide what I wanted to color those. I didn't know if I was going to color those blue to match the eye so we could get a little bit more blue in, leave them as brass or put them as gold. But I think silver. Silver is a nice touch. Some extra bolts there, just for that little bit of flair. We're just delicately going around the sides. It's very easy to go ahead and paint the tops of these, but the sides is a little bit more tricky. But we'll use a black wash to hide anything that goes over. Anything that goes over too much, we still have our bronze paint that we can bring out a little bit more of. Okay, how's that looking? Good. Let's go ahead and move on to the spear, shall we? And what we're going to do for all of the silver bits is we're going to use a black wash for these. So once we're done with the silver, once we're happy that it's all dry, we can come in with a black wash. And then we'll come back in with the silver again, because the black wash will dull that silver down. We'll use the original silver paint as a highlight, and then maybe, depending on how it looks, we'll bring in some white. I'm pretty happy with that. I think it's a really good addition. We're also going to try adding some black wash to the rest of the body, just to distinguish it from the gold a little bit. Actually, I take that back. I think that doesn't quite match. So we'll pull that back away, and that's okay. We'll come up with a different wash, or maybe we'll leave it. We'll see. We'll see how we feel a little bit later on. For now, let's tackle the staff. It's a little bit too close to silver, so we want to give that more of a black metal effect. So we should be able to easily accomplish that with some black wash. So what we're going to do is just completely coat the staff or the handle in black wash, and then we're going to come in after the fact, before it dries, with a clean, slightly damp brush, and we're just going to pull off the top layer on the top side, and that gives the impression of a highlight. That way it's still darkened the paint underneath it just a little bit, but we get more of a natural highlight. There we go, and we do the same thing to the spear tip as well. Just a little bit off the top, give it the effect of that sheen, and a little bit off of the edges, and there we go. Alright, delicately does it here. We don't have to be too delicate with the black wash on the top sections, but we do want to be a bit delicate as we get closer to the eye. You don't want anything getting in the eye. But if it gets in the areas around the mouth or around the outside of this silver piece, that's okay. That'll help. Honestly, that will help tie everything together, and it'll add a little bit more of a shadow effect, more than the red wash could have done. Alright, and you can see how much it really darkens that silver. I don't know about you, but that's a little bit too dark for me. So when we're done, once that wash is dry, you do want to make sure it's dry, we'll go in with our original silver and we'll bring that color back up. We'll bring that shine back in. I can't imagine that these would have had any dull parts to them, these monodrones. They're so mechanical and shiny in the artwork that we want to do that justice. There we go. Since these bits are recessed, I'm also going to add a little bit more wash in there just for the edges. I don't want it going to cover the entire area. So I'm going to pull some of that back as best as I can with a clean brush, and then just let the black wash soak into the recesses around the edges. There we go. That kind of helps separate it from the rest of the bronze, as well as separate it from the silver too. While we have our black wash, let's add a little bit more definition between the wings and the brass and gold bits, as well as between the wing or the feathers themselves. Just a light little bit. Just a tiny, tiny little bit, just to give that effect. We don't want to undo our hard work of whitening these wings up, but we do want to give them a little bit more definition. And with a wet brush, we'll feather that out, just so it looks a little bit more natural. And so everything looks like it's its own piece. Hi, cat. I'm actually painting in the area where my cat likes to lay down in front of the window, in front of the sun, and bathe in that sunlight, but unfortunately there's not much space for him right now. So we'll make sure that there's space later for him to lay down and get some sunbathing in. Also going to see if we can use a little bit of that black wash, watered down, and blend it in from the underside of the sphere, just to give that effect of shadow and shading. When you've got it's not a flat surface, but a non-detailed surface, it can be really important to let the paint do the storytelling for you, where it looks like it is a proper three-dimensional object. The reason we add all of the shading for all of these minis is because light doesn't work quite the same way when you're painting something smaller. When you've got something small, it doesn't hit the same way as something big and full size. So we have to do a little bit of extra work, and we're going to try and let the black wash do that for us. We go in heavy on the bottom and then fade it upwards. Just use our brush to pull it up and water it down. overall, I'm pretty happy with how this mini is going so far. We still have a few areas to touch up. Obviously, we got the silver to come in with. I do have some brown wash off to the side, or I think it's actually sepia wash. It's like a flesh wash. I'm going to add that around the eye, just to give it a little bit of color. The eye being pure white, it doesn't seem quite natural. So we're just going to go in with a bit of sepia wash, let that soak into the edges, and then pull back some of it so that we still have some of that white eye, but not quite as much. That way it looks a little bit like it's part of the mechanism. It's not, it doesn't seem too jarring. All right, let's see if that black wash trick works for the pupil. I think that might be a little bit too light. Yeah, that's definitely a little bit too light. Even if we go in really heavy, we'll let that sit for a little bit. Needs to dry anyway if we're going to put some black paint in there, but we'll let that sit. We'll check in on it a little bit later, see how we're feeling about it. Like I said earlier, that's okay if you don't like something that you've tried. We're going in nice thin layers, so it's really easy to fix your mistakes with paint. We're building up on those layers for the sphere just to give it some of that extra shading where the underside isn't getting a lot of that natural sunlight or ambient light. And I do want to fill in some of those dents a little bit. It's got a few scratches, it's got a few dents on the orb, and I want to get the shadow black wash into there. We're also going to try and separate some of those feathers. Even though up close it looks like each of those is individual feathers, at a distance those might blend together a little bit, so I'm just adding a little bit of differentiation there in the recesses. And I might still come in with a bit of white just to highlight the feathers on top a little bit. I think the black wash did a bit more than I was expecting, especially on that the wing on my right, it's left, so I'll probably have to touch those up a little bit, but that's okay. Painting's all about just going with the flow, trying things out, see what works. Now that the black wash is definitely dry here on this silver bit, we're just going to highlight the edges of the metal. We're not going to go too much into the middle portion of it. We're just going to highlight the edges and let that indicate a light source. We're also going to tap those little rivets. Just a little dot of paint on those. There we go. I think we might do a little bit on all of the edges. I'm not sure. I originally want to try just from the top down to indicate a light source on top, but you know what? We'll also go on some of the other edges, I think, because those are going to be the most worn, the most weathered parts, where, you know, when dirt and grime builds up on a surface and, you know, you handle an object, the parts that you handle, those wear off the dirt and the grime. And that's the same thing with the edges of items. So we'll give those a little bit of a highlight on all sides, I think. And that way, it'll also bring back a little bit more of that silver look. It'll bring back a little bit of that brightness. Because these minis they're fairly bright. They're fairly shiny. Since these are beings from the plane of order, and you imagine that they probably keep themselves pretty well, so they're not going to have a whole bunch of dirt and grime, but, you know, it's inevitable. Sometimes dirt and grime build up. It's just going to happen, especially if they're crossing over into our world. And I kind of imagine this little monodrone is in our world, considering they're on what I think is a patch of earth or a patch of ground, exposed dirt and ground underneath their feet. So they're not on a mechanical surface. They're here. They're with us. And then for this bit, we're not using the tip of our brush. We're actually just using the edge of our brush to lightly stride across those hard edges of the mini. If you tried to go in with the tip of your brush, you'd go a little bit too thick generally. So just use the paint on the edge. But you don't want too much paint. I did that a little bit earlier, but that's okay. I think it still looks good. And just put a little bit of paint on the top of these little rivets, these little nubs. Not really sure what they are. Seem entirely for style, and that's cool. Okay, how are we feeling about this so far? I'm really happy with this little guy. I do think that Iris wants some black paint. Oh, sorry, the pupil wants some black paint. Other than that, I think we're good. Maybe a little touch up right over here. Little bit of extra definition. Those colors look like they were blending just a little bit, so just a little bit of black wash. Just to form a little bit of a shadow line there. But otherwise, I'm really happy with that. And I hope you're happy with your mini too, whether it's the monodrone or if you're painting something else. Oh, sorry about that little bit of a shake. Let's stabilize that. Let's go ahead and grab our black paint really quick. Alright, we have abyssal black. And we don't need a ton, just a little tiny bit. Because we're just putting it in the pupil there. So just a little dab with our brush. We don't need to water it down. We're just gonna gently go in there. Okay, let's go ahead and bring out some of our other paints. Let's bring out our gold again, just a little bit. We're going to work on highlighting some of the areas that we covered with our red wash, just to bring back some of that brilliant gold. We're only just gently going in with our high spots, like the cheeks. It might be a little bit too hard to do the top lip, so for now, let's just do the cheeks. Some rosy gold cheeks. And we don't want to undo all of our hard work. We're just hitting the high spots. We want to leave some of the red shadow wash, or our red wash in the shadows there. That's why we put it there after all. You can see how easy this is, just a quick little dab. Just to bring back some of that shine for the high spots. That's where the light's going to be hitting the most, so we want to make sure that those bits are brilliant. The feet are probably going to be the most interesting part, since there's such a wide surface area that was covered with the wash. But I'm up for a challenge. Just want to try and make sure we avoid those recesses. We don't even have to get too close. Hi, cat. As long as we hit the main high points, we can either feather the gold down, or because the gold's a little bit translucent, so it might not even need it. It might be a simple matter of just brushing on our paint very delicately in thin layers. There we go. Okay, I think that's all of the gold areas touched up now. And you can actually use gold to act as a highlight on bronze. It does a pretty good job. But for now, because we didn't really add much shading to the bronze, I think the next step is to bring our white back out. And we're going to use just a little bit of white here and there and highlight all of our silver bits. And a little bit on the wings, I think. So just nice little bits just to go on the rivets here. It's a little thick. Let me get rid of some paint. Just a very tiny dab. Tiny dab. Tiny dab. And if you go a little bit too big, that's okay. That's just an extra shiny rivet. That one's polished. There we go. There we go. Just a little tiny dab on these top little rivets here too. I'm just gonna put a little bit of white paint on the edge of the feathers. There we go. Just to bring that brilliant white back. There you go. Try and get some of the darker areas brought back to a white. The high points of the feathers, just use the edge of the brush, just like we did before. And once we're happy with those, we'll use the edge of the brush again for the spear. I don't know if it really comes across, but it's kind of a round spear tip. It's not very sharp or jagged or anything like that. So that means we're going to have to be extra delicate with that. Not to mention the top is a round surface, so we're going to have to steady our hands a little bit. See if we can focus. Hands are a little shaky, but that's okay. I think that still came out good. There we go. Just some quick lines. There we go. Just to accentuate the edges of the spear. A little bit more white towards the tip, I think. That's where it's going to be the sharpest. That's where it's probably going to, that's going to reflect the most light on those hard, edges of the blade. I don't know if you can see, I'm using my pinky at the bottom of this mini holder just to kind of help stabilize my hand. Just to eliminate as many shakes in my hand as possible. So now that I think we're reaching the end of this mini, and I do think we're close, but we're not quite there yet, we're just going to start touching up some of the areas where I feel like we need to go back over. So I'm going to add a little bit of that light blue back into the top of the eye. Just some quick little lines. Clean up that extra thick dark blue line that I did earlier, but also just to give that effect of a highlight. There we go. And then after that, I think we have a few other pieces of gold that we need to touch up on. we just have a few bits here and there. Not a lot. I don't know if I missed these or if I just went a little bit too thin. There we go. Alright. There's definitely going to be a lot of back and forth between colors, and that's okay. We're just touching things up here and there. So we're just coming in with a black wash, just a real subtle shadow underneath all of the gold, just to kind of help differentiate the gold parts and the brass parts, or the bronze parts. Just to give that a little bit of separation so that it's a little bit of that red darkened down. There we go. I think that really helps to kind of show that these are separate parts from a distance. If you want this to be a little bit more subtle, instead of using a watered down black wash, you could try going for a dark brown wash. There we go. And we're also just going to add a little bit of shadow just to the underside of certain parts, just to emphasize that the light's not really hitting these areas. Okay, next, I think we're gonna come back in with our bronze and just touch up some of these areas that might have gotten a little bit of red on them, or a little bit of another color on them, like we were doing a little bit of black wash experimentation on one of these legs. I want to bring that bronze color back right there. Just clean up anywhere where the red wash got a little bit too far. Really emphasize that shiny metallic color. And at this point, you probably could go in with a thin, very thin gold wash? No, a gold paint. Just to achieve that same highlight effect. Something else that you could do is also mix in a light yellow color with your metallic paints. So right here, I'm just adding a very thin gold paint, just to try and give that image of a highlight. And you can use gold as a highlight without it blending into the other colors really well, especially when you go into nice thin layers. Just a bit more concentrated gold on those cheeks, just to give it some dimples, you know? Emphasize the high points there. Maybe a little bit of gold on that chin, too. I'm pretty happy with this. I think we're getting very, very close to the end. Just have a few more details. Yeah, I think I want to add a little bit more dimension to the spear, to the brass bits with a bit of... I don't have much left, but I have some shadow, dark wash. Just gonna add a little black wash here. I might have to get a little bit more for what I want to do with this mini, or with this spear and its details. I want some of those angles to kind of separate from each other. Yeah, just a bit more shadow wash, bear with me. Or I should say black wash. And then we can put some in the recesses in there just to really accentuate the shadows inside, because we didn't paint in there. No, we didn't need to. And now just a couple of highlights. We're going in with just a very light touch of gold. Just the lightest touch of gold, just to give it that shine. There we go. Alright, let's take a look. Dare I say this one's done? No, I don't think so. I don't think so, not quite yet. I still got a few scrapes and scratches that I missed earlier that I want to highlight. Anything that gives this mini a little bit more detail, a little bit more of a story to tell when it's on the table. This may be from the Plan of Order, but it's been through some things. It's seen some battles. Or maybe it's just a really hard worker. Just got a few dings here and there, and it hasn't gotten patched up yet. I think the next thing I want to do is go in and highlight that eye a little bit with a little white dot. Yeah, that's perfect. That's what the eye was missing. Just that little spot of white highlight, just to give the eye a little bit of extra dimension. I think I am going to try mixing a little bit of angelic yellow in with my bronze though, and highlighting just a bit more on the top. Just a little bit more of an extra sheen, an extra shine, just to really emphasize the shape of this. And thinning it down as it gets further down. Just blending in some of the other colors, blending in some of that dark wash. Okay, and with that, I think we are all done. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed your stay. And if you painted along, don't forget to let me know what you painted in the comments. And I hope you're happy with the end result. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, all of that fun stuff. And hopefully you'll join me in a future video. I'll see you around. Bye.